Today's sermon is from Jeremiah 50 to 51, but the Bible reading is just from Jeremiah 50, verses 1 to 10. This is the word the Lord spoke through Jeremiah the prophet concerning Babylon and the land of the Babylonians. Announce and proclaim among the nations. Lift up a banner and proclaim it. Keep nothing back, but say, Babylon will be captured. Bel will be put to shame, Marduk filled with terror. Her images will be put to shame, and her idols filled with terror. A nation from the north will attack her and lay waste her land. No one will live in it. Both people and animals will flee away. In those days, at that time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God. They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces towards it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. My people have been lost sheep. The shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains. They wandered over mountain and hill and forgot their own resting place. Whoever found them devoured them. Their enemies said, We are not guilty, for they sinned against the Lord, their verdant pasture, the Lord, the hope of their ancestors. Flee out of Babylon, leave the land of the Babylonians, and be like the goats that lead the flock. For I will stir up and bring against Babylon an alliance of great nations from the land of the north. They will take up their positions against her, and from the north she will be captured. Their arrows will be like skilled warriors who do not return empty-handed. So Babylonia will be plundered. All who plunder her will have their fill, declares the Lord.
Thanks, Sammy. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've heard Jeffrey, we've heard Sammy, and there's going to be a whole lot of others of you in the room today, that it's your last principles hour before you go out to be a light for Christ in a dark and needy world. And I want to add to Amy and others saying that we will miss you. For others, that moment when you go out from here is still a year or two away. What I want to spend some time doing now is let's think about what happens next after you finish at SMBC and go out. Let's imagine some possibilities. Let's say you join a mission agency and you move to a Hindu majority part of Asia. You soon realise that you've entered a world where the path to popularity and security and influence is the path of being Hindu, being part of that dominant majority there. When Hindu people speak, others listen. When Hindu people need something, they have a network around them who can help them. You, by contrast, as a Christian, you feel like you're part of this small, weak, inconsequential minority. If being Hindu is the path to success, well, being Christian seems like the opposite. When you follow Christ and his ways, when you won't pay a bribe, for example, your visa is delayed. When you won't join in an idol ceremony, you're shunned by the people that live around you. You've come here to preach the gospel, but so far no one's responded. Gospel just seems to be weak and powerless. And as you look around, seeing local Hindus who are popular and admired and secure and in control of this society here, a feeling wells up in your heart. It's a feeling you never would have expected back when you were here at SMBC. Jealousy. You want what they've got. Or maybe you graduate from SMBC and you begin serving in church ministry here in Australia. Numbers are small, attendance is patchy, your salary is modest, just enough to live simply by. It feels like what you're part of here is small and weak and unimportant. At the same time, the people that Australian culture is putting up on a pedestal as successful, the ones who've achieved wealth or influence or celebrity, they've all gone down a very different path to get where they've got to the Jesus-following path that you've been following. Most of the time, they just ignore Jesus, and if they do talk about him, it's usually to mock or to laugh. One day, you're chatting with an old non-Christian school friend who's done very well for herself financially, and she says to you, look, I'm sorry to be blunt, but you Christians are on the wrong side of history. Society has moved on. Christianity is on the way out. You're shooting yourself in the foot by pouring your life into this vestige from the past. And your internal response as she says this to you shocks you. It's one you would never have expected to have when you were back here at SMBC, because you find yourself wondering if she might be right. Let's admit it, this community that we have here, this SMBC community, it's a bit of an aberration in the world at large, or in Australian society at large, because here in this community, being a committed, mission-minded follower of Jesus is the norm. We are the dominant majority here. But when we move out of this community, where we're immersed in a new dominant culture, where positions of influence and success and strength and security are held by people who are indifferent to Jesus or maybe even hostile to Jesus, then might we lose confidence in him? Might we stop trusting him and his ways? When you go out there and you pour yourself into serving Jesus and the majority around you don't, in fact, when they throw your words from God about Jesus into the fire, and yet they're the ones who are accumulating influence and friends and wealth and success and respect, what effect might that have on your faith? Might you doubt? Might you question if God really is in control? If the Jesus-following life really is the blessed life? Well, the Israelite exiles to whom today's text is addressed are in a similar situation. Though they are the true God Yahweh's people, they feel weak and powerless. While Babylon, a nation hostile to Yahweh, seems to be all-powerful and successful, as if they're the ones with the true God behind them. Let me show you what I mean. Keep your Bibles open to Jeremiah 50 and 51. Let's remember the story so far. So Babylon has invaded and conquered Judah. They've sacked Jerusalem. They've destroyed the temple. And the surviving Israelites are now exiles in the mighty, wealthy, glitteringly successful empire of Babylon. How are the exiles feeling? Have a look with me at chapter 50, verse 17. Israel is a scattered flock that lions have chased away. The first to devour them was the king of Assyria. The last to crush their bones was Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Just picture for a moment a scattered flock of sheep that's been attacked not once but twice by lions, leaving the few surviving sheep completely traumatized. Those traumatized surviving sheep, that's the exiles. That's how they feel. If this is the fate of Yahweh's people, who really is in control here? And it's not just that the exiles have this trauma from past harm, their trouble continues into the present as well. Chapter 50, verse 33. The people of Israel are oppressed, and the people of Judah as well. All their captors hold them fast, refusing to let them go. So that's their present situation. They are oppressed captives. I mean, if this is the fate of Yahweh's people, who really is in control here? Because what it feels like to the exiles is that the only all-powerful one is the king of Babylon. Chapter 51, verse 34. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has devoured us. He has thrown us into confusion. He has made us an empty jar. Just picture for a moment a gluttonous man greedily devouring a meal and then throwing away the empty jar. For the exiles, it feels like the king of Babylon is that man and they are that jar. He has the power. They, though they are Yahweh's people, are completely powerless. But it's not just powerlessness. There's another feeling that the exiles are experiencing, and that is shame. Chapter 50, verse 51. We are disgraced, for we have been insulted, and shame covers our faces, because foreigners have entered the holy places of the Lord's house. The exiles feel this deep spiritual shame. Their temple, this is the house of the supposedly all-powerful Yahweh, that temple's been desecrated. It's like their spiritual nakedness has been exposed for the whole world to see. Maybe you've felt something of that shame when Christianity is mocked by a celebrity on a talk show or an intellectual at a debate. When things that are precious to you, truths about God, stories about Jesus, are held out like dirty linen and spat upon by unbelievers. Or maybe some of our alumni who live in countries where faith in Jesus is illegal have felt something of that shame when police close churches and mistreat Christians and a false religion is held up as true. So, that's Yahweh's people. They are feeling like vulnerable sheep, like powerless captives, and like shamed worshippers. That's Yahweh's people. And meanwhile, over here, we've got the ones who are strong and successful and in control. They're actually Yahweh's opponents. Chapter 50, verse 24, Babylon has opposed Yahweh. Or verse 28, they have destroyed the temple. Or verse 29, they have defied Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. Or verse 31, Babylon is arrogant. Or verse 38, Babylon is a land of idols. Chapter 51, verse 24, Babylon is doing wrong in Zion. See, Babylon is everything you could possibly imagine an anti-Yahweh force to be. And yet she is this glitteringly successful superpower. Chapter 50, verse 36, she's known for her warriors and horses and chariots. She's strong. Chapter 51, verse 13, she lives by many waters and is rich in treasures. She's wealthy. Chapter 51, verse 48, Babylon's city wall is thick and her gates are high. She seems impregnable. See, though Babylon is so opposed to Yahweh and opposed to Yahweh's ways, she's the one with the strength and the security and the success and the influence. And shockingly, chapter 51, verse 44, she is the one to whom the nations are streaming. Now, if you know anything about the storyline of the Bible, you know that this is the very thing that the nations are supposed to do to Jerusalem, to Yahweh's city. When his people there display his power and wisdom by being a blessed people, a holy people, a righteous and distinct and prosperous people, when the nations see that, they're supposed to stream to Jerusalem and then discover Yahweh there. That's the blueprint for mission. But what's happening here, what the exiles are witnessing, is that the nations are streaming to prosperous Babylon. What a disorienting, what a potentially faith-destroying situation that the exiles find themselves in. I remember when I was at school, there was a guy who was successful and popular and cool, and he got a spike haircut, which means sort of short and gelled so everything sticks straight up. Pretty soon we all got spike haircuts. And then the next year he got a step haircut. Does anyone remember a step haircut? It means really thick at the back and then suddenly short. So there's this little step at the back. We all got step haircuts. Then he got a haircut with this really long fringe and everything else was really short. And we did the same. And there you go. That's evidence of a basic human impulse playing out in my life. You can see it in all cultures throughout history. See, we look at the people around us, and when we see people who are succeeding, we imitate, don't we? Whether it's the kids at school with super cool haircuts, or whether it's a whole people group with their religion and their worldview. We're constantly playing follow the leader. We're constantly hoping that their success will rub off on us if we imitate. So what's going to happen with the exiles here? Will they switch allegiance? Will they abandon Yahweh, that weak, powerless God, and put their hope instead in the Babylonian gods of Marduk and Bel? If that's the path to cool, I'll get that haircut. If that's the religious path to spiritual prosperity and blessing, I'll walk along it. Well, how does Jeremiah, God's prophet, address this situation, this problem? He spent, and we saw earlier in the semester, he spent so much time pre-exile warning the sinful Israelites to repent or face judgment. And then when they didn't and exile happened, immediately post-exile, he advised the newly arrived exiles to settle down because it was going to be a long haul. What about now, years later, when they have settled down? But increasingly, having faith in Yahweh seems foolish, seems ridiculous, seems absurd. How will Jeremiah address the faith crisis that this situation provokes? What he does is he gives the exiles a vision of the future, coupled with an exhortation in the present. Let's take those one by one. We'll start with the vision of the future, which is Babylon will fall. Babylon will fall. Chapter 50, verse 2. Announce and proclaim among the nations. Lift up a banner and proclaim it. Keep nothing back, but say, Babylon will be captured. That is the future, says Jeremiah. The captor will become the captive. This seemingly invincible and impregnable one will be overthrown. And the theological implications of that are profound. Keep reading in verse 2. Bel, that is the Babylonian storm god, will be put to shame. Marduk, Babylon's chief god, filled with terror. Her images will be put to shame, her idols filled with terror. Babylon's fall will mean shame and terror for her gods. This is what the vulnerable, doubting exiles need to know. Let's keep reading, verse 3. A nation from the north will attack her and lay waste her land. No one will live in it. Both people and animals will flee away. See, that exiles, that is the future of Babylon. It'll be a wasteland. Now, there's over 100 verses in this preaching text today, chapters 50 and 51, and over 90% of them are devoted to declaring this very simple message: Babylon will fall. Jeremiah says it over and over and over again. And what he's saying to the exiles through this text is all is not as it seems. What appears powerful, what appears strong, what appears rich and successful, what appears eternal is not. And it's vital that this message sinks in, that all these images, the repetitions over the 100 verses, they're all there to drill this image deeply into their hearts and their minds, because Every day when the exiles look out their windows, when they go to the markets, when they do their work, that's not the image that they see with their eyes, is it? What they see is this mighty, successful Babylon having a great old time. Have a look at chapter 50, verse 11. Because you, that is Babylon, because you rejoice and are glad, you who pillage my inheritance, because you frolic like a heifer threshing grain and neigh like stallions, your mother will be greatly ashamed. She who gave you birth will be disgraced. She will be the least of the nations, a wilderness, a dry land, a desert. See, right now, Babylon is on top. They're frolicking like a heifer, neighing like a stallion, and the exiles attempted to think that Babylon is it, that they are the coolest kid in school, the one to follow and be like and imitate and copy their haircut. But no, all is not as it seems. Your mother will be greatly ashamed. This glittering success is temporary. It's all about to end, says Jeremiah. Babylon will fall fast and far. See, everything that makes Babylon alluring now, seductive now, everything that makes Israel tempted to believe that Babylon's gods are in fact supreme, all of it's going to be wiped out by the one who truly is supreme and sovereign, Yahweh. All is not as it seems. Babylon will fall. Therefore, what? What should the exiles do? They've got to get ready to flee. And this is the exhortation for the present. Be ready to flee Babylon. Because if all is not as it seems, if that is the future, that the presently successful Babylon is going to become a wasteland, then exiles, don't follow them. Don't wish you a part of them. Don't compromise your allegiance to Yahweh by trying to be part of them or like them. Babylon is doomed. It's going to fall. Instead, what you need to do is be ready when the time is right to flee. Chapter 50, verse 8. Flee out of Babylon. Leave the land of the Babylonians and be like the goats that lead the flock. Be ready to flee so that when Babylon's fall comes, you'll be like that first goat running out of the pen. Chapter 51, verse 6. Flee from Babylon. Run for your lives. Do not be destroyed because of her sins. It is time for the Lord's vengeance. He will repay her what she deserves. Or if you skip down to verse 45, come out of her, my people. Run for your lives. Run from the fierce anger of the Lord. See, God's judgment is going to fall on Babylon, and you don't want to be there when it does. You don't want to attach yourself to those doomed people. You don't want to assimilate into a place that's going to go up in flames because they are anti-Yahweh. Maybe exiles, maybe you feel the seduction of Babylon's wealth, the allure of her success. Don't fall for it. Don't give in to the temptation to jump ship. See, as a follower of Yahweh, you already are on the right side of history, the right side of salvation history. So hold on to the hope of Yahweh, the hope that Yahweh holds out. Don't enmesh yourself with sinful Babylon so that when the time is right and God opens up a way, you will be ready to flee this doomed city. Where to? Where do they flee to? Well, they flee to the city whose future is bright. Chapter 50, verse 4. In those days, at that time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God. They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. See, the exiles have a choice to make, and it's a choice between two cities. Babylon, the successful, powerful, seemingly invincible one, and Jerusalem, the weak, defeated, seemingly cursed one. But what the exiles need to understand as they make this choice is the future of both of those cities. Babylon will become a wasteland. Zion, Jerusalem, will be a place of everlasting covenant, a place where you're bound to God in relationship and blessing. When I was a kid, cigarette ads would show pictures of healthy, happy, attractive, energetic people enjoying their cigarettes. And indeed, I can remember many people around me who were healthy and happy and young enjoying their cigarettes, just like in the ads. But there came a time, I can't remember exactly when it was, maybe it was in the 90s or the 2000s, when the government said, no, if you want to advertise those cigarettes, you need to show us what the future looks like as well. Show us, what does our future look like if we smoke those cigarettes? And then the billboards changed. For a while, we still had the pictures of the healthy, happy, attractive, energetic people, but alongside them, maybe on the panel on the right or down the bottom, there was this other picture. It was the government warning picture. It was the future. A sickly-looking man with yellow teeth or diseased lips. A hospitalised woman with a hole in her neck for breathing. A cancerous tongue. A tar-ridden lung. To the young would-be smoker staring at the billboard of happy, healthy, attractive, energetic people comes this message, which is, all is not as it seems. Before you go down that path, consider its future. And to the Israelite at risk of being seduced by Babylon's glittering temptations and success, Jeremiah has this message from the highest government of them all. All is not as it seems. Consider the future. This is the future. See it, and in faith resist the allure and seduction of Babylon. Hold fast in hope to Yahweh and his ways. Separate yourselves from the anti-Yahweh idolatry that drives Babylon, so that when the moment comes, you're able to flee. Because if that moment comes and you're currently entranced by her wealth, you're relying on the security that she provides, you're worshipping her gods, you're enmeshed into her sin, you won't be able to flee. And you will go down with her in judgment. So what does all this mean for us? We're not Jewish exiles living in Babylon, awaiting Babylon's fall. What does it mean, this message that was originally delivered to them, what does it mean as God's word for us today? Well, the Apostle John asked the very same question. So let's turn to Revelation 18. Because in Revelation 18, we find the Apostle John applying Jeremiah 50 and 51 to the context in which he and his readers found themselves. So John's readers, John's audience are first century Christians now. And they were facing similar pressures to the exiles of Jeremiah's day. They too were subjects of a powerful, glitteringly successful empire, this time Rome. And they too felt pressure. Pressure to compromise with the ways of idolatrous Rome, perhaps by joining in their idol feasts, perhaps by participating in their immoral, unethical, Jesus-dishonouring pathways to influence and success and effectiveness. So they too, the Christians of John's day, they're looking around and they're seeing that the followers of the true God, the followers of Jesus, are weak and persecuted, while the opponents of the true God, the opponents of Jesus, are the ones who are thriving. How does John help them in Revelation 18? He gives them a vision of the future. Chapter 18, verse 2. Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons, a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. See what John does here? He takes Jeremiah's vision of the future for that day, the future from Jeremiah's day, that Babylon will fall, and he applies it to this new situation. Now Rome is pictured as the Babylon of old, with the message that she too is going to fall. That's her future too. So what should the Christians that John is writing to do? Well, here's the exhortation for the present. Quoting from Jeremiah 51 in Revelation 18:4, John writes, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes." Babylon will fall, so come out of her. Flee. Flee to where? Once again, it's to Jerusalem, just as it was in Jeremiah's day. If we keep reading the book of Revelation, we get to chapters 20 and chapter 21, and we have a picture of Jerusalem. This time it's the new Jerusalem, the eternal city. And so once again, we see that God's people have this choice between two cities. And so John's message to these first century Christians is hold fast to Christ. Don't jump ship. Don't compromise with Rome's anti-God ways. Come out of sinful, idolatrous Babylon. Separate from her sin. Put your hope instead in the eternal city and live now as its citizen so that you're unencumbered, so you're ready to flee when the new Jerusalem appears. Don't become so enmeshed to Rome's sin and Rome's idolatry that when that day comes, you're stuck there and you go down in judgment with them. So you see, John reapplies the Babylon will fall, flee Babylon message to this new context, to Christians who are living under a new dominant, successful, seductive power. And so I want to say that if it can be reapplied like that to Rome, then it can also be reapplied to other times and other contexts, including ours. See, no matter what our Babylon is, no matter what the dominant culture around us is that might seem successful and powerful and in control, that makes following Christ seem silly or foolish or wrong side of history-ish, no matter what our Babylon is, this is the message for us, that all is not as it seems. That this Babylon around us too will fall. And that the real future lies with a different city, the New Jerusalem. Sure, the glittering success of the Babylon around us is going to make us want to think otherwise, but don't be fooled, don't be seduced. When we see it, when we see the apparent success of this Babylon around us, and it looks like that first picture in the cigarette ad with the happy, healthy, attractive, energetic people, we need to learn to see it with eyes of faith. We need to learn to see the Babylon around us with that other picture, the government warning picture, the one that depicts the real future that is coming, that grotesque picture, the frightening future that lies ahead for all who fall for Babylon's seductions and compromise with her anti-God ways and use her anti-God paths to power. All who assimilate to Babylon and abandon Christ. Because this Babylon around us, it's going to fall. Come out of her. Be ready to flee out of her. You and I, we need to learn to see with eyes of faith that reality. So let's finish by returning to those imagined post-college futures. You're in a Hindu majority land and you're feeling jealous of the majority and their good life and their success. Or you're in secular majority Australia and you're wondering if you might be on the wrong side of history. What do you do next in that situation? at that moment, you remember that God has given you a wonderful resource for this very moment. He's given you a vision of the future. And so you go there. With eyes of faith, you go there, you go to that vision and you meditate on it. And then you think through all the elements of this Babylon around you world that is causing these troubles. And you bring God's vision of the future to each of those things. The visa official asking for the bribe. The local Hindu people who are reveling in their influence and success. The secular Australians who are getting ahead, enjoying their security and respect that you don't have. The smallness and weakness of the ministry you're involved in. You take all of those elements, you take all of that and you view it through the lens of this vision of the future where Babylon falls and the new Jerusalem appears. And the more that you do that, the more the jealousy is going to recede. The more the temptation to use ungodly means to get ahead is going to lose its strength. The more the desire to copy those people will fade away because you're going to realize that that path, that's not the path to ultimate success. It's the path to terminal spiritual lung cancer. And as you meditate on this vision of the future, you're going to find yourself less and less wanting what they've got and more wanting them to know what you've got and wanting to invite them to be a part of it.